How's it going, guys? In case you didn't know, my name is James. So let me preface this countdown by saying this list contains only single-player games, because I'm not much of a multiplayer gamer. For a game to qualify for this list, I would have had to finish the main campaign of said game. How I chose the games for this list was based off a few methods of evaluation. My first method was based on my subjective view of the game's quality. Another thing I considered was the lasting impact these games will have on me. What I mean by this, was the game memorable? Did it influence my opinion on what makes a great video game? How much did the game impact me on a personal level? Did it influence my interest in gaming? I also considered the era in which the game came out. Meaning, did I feel like the game was ahead of its time? Or was it the best game it could be considering the time in which it came out? Before I begin, I want to share my honorable mentions to recognize games that just missed the list. And those games are Jak and Daxter, Kingdom Hearts, Little Big Planet, Infamous 2, Fallout 4, Grand Theft Auto 5, Uncharted Drake's Fortune, Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception, Marvel's Spider-Man, and Batman Arkham City. Starting off at number 10, we have a game that was recently remade for the current generation of consoles. It's the oldest game on this list as it was released back in 1998. I wouldn't say Spyro the Dragon was the first video game I ever played, but it was the first one I vividly remember playing and enjoying. To replay an updated 20-year-old game on the PS4 was a breath of fresh air, because platformers are not nearly as prevalent as they once were. Sure, Spyro the Dragon is simplistic in concept, but it's super fun to play as so many games in the PS1 era. Part of it's nostalgia, but a big reason why I put Spyro the Dragon on this list is for the influence it had on me to get into video games in the first place. Okay, so number 9 on the list is a superhero game that does not feature a name from Marvel or DC Comics. It's a game that stars Cole McGrath with his electrokinesis powers. Now, I mentioned Batman Arkham City and Marvel's Spider-Man in the honorable mentions, and collectively so, because these games are both outstanding. However, one of the reasons that I put Infamous and not Arkham City or Spider-Man on this list was because I found it refreshing to experience a new superhero story. And though Cole McGrath was kind of viewed by many to have a dull personality, I thought his story was super interesting. I also have to praise Infamous for its map of this metropolitan open world, as it was fun to explore. But what I loved about Infamous most of all was its interest in game mechanics. The karmic system allowed you to play as good or evil and would have an impact on Cole's story. Using electricity as a power was super cool, and many different abilities you acquired from gaining XP was more than worth it. At number 8, we have a game that took me 8 years to experience, but I finally played it this past summer to get ready for the prequel. Developer Rockstar Games' attention to detail within the worlds of the Red Dead Redemption series and Grand Theft Auto 5 is unlike anything I've seen within this art form. Moreover, it's easy to feel immersed in the world of Red Dead Redemption with its stellar music, atmosphere, and characters. With a memorable voice, personality, and wit, John Marston is one of my favorite protagonists in any game. Narratives in Grand Theft Auto 5 and many other open-world games have failed to hook me from start to finish. But that's not the case with Red Dead Redemption. Unfortunately though, Red Dead Redemption's conclusion was spoiled for me before I played. But even with that being said, Red Dead Redemption's shocking ending will go down as one of my favorites. Number 7 on my list is a game that seems bizarre as a concept, but was truly a joy to play as a kid. For a game that came out in 2006 on the PS2, the graphics of Kingdom Hearts 2 were quite impressive for its time. Though the narrative is convoluted and confusing, it's still a charming story that is difficult to dislike. With the new drive form mechanic and the enhanced camera controls, Kingdom Hearts 2 gameplay improved from the original. Additionally, I felt Kingdom Hearts 1 could be over difficult at times, while this entry was easier and made for a less frustrating experience. At its core, Kingdom Hearts 2 is a button masher where you do most of your attacks by pressing the X button and reaction commands by pressing triangle. But even with its repetitive controls, Kingdom Hearts 2 has epic attack animations that make combat a blast. Coming in at number 6 on my list is a game with a massive world that I played for over 200 hours. Since this was the first Bethesda game I ever played, I was so overwhelmed by the size and the scope of the map back when I played it in 2011. Skyrim's humongous map and its various classes to play as gave this game endless replayability. But what makes Skyrim special is the level of immersion the game creates through its sound design, music, and atmosphere. I have never been more immersed into a game. It was one of these games where you could easily lose track of time and end up playing well into the night. The number 5 entry on this list is a very recent game and a prequel to a beloved Western game. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Red Dead Redemption 2 is the best open world game I've ever played. No open world game has ever had a more compelling narrative, characters, atmosphere, and attention to detail. Arthur Morgan is even a better protagonist than John Marston. It's a technical achievement that will set a new standard for this media. Okay, I gotta say, ranking 4 through 2 on this list was the toughest part of this video. It took a lot of thinking here. So at number 4, we have an entry from my all-time favorite video game series and developer. Uncharted 4 at Thieves' End was well worth the 5-year wait from its previous entry. It improves upon gameplay as it added some fun new mechanics. It told a more emotional and complex story. It expanded the environments within this linear game series. Every time a new Naughty Dog game comes out, I find myself in awe of the visual fidelity, and Uncharted 4 is no exception. The voice acting and writing of Uncharted 4 is also phenomenal, as Naughty Dog continues to push the boundaries of narratives in games. No doubt Uncharted 4 is a narrative-driven experience, but it does everything I want from a modern AAA game, as it has no glaring weaknesses. My third favorite game of all time is something I would have never predicted enjoying it as much as I did. Frankly, I was not even sure if I would play it before it came out. Though, when I saw the overwhelming praise this game was getting online, I knew I had to check it out. The reason I was hesitant to play God of War was because the original trilogy never seemed appealing enough for me to jump into. Sure, the gameplay looked fun, but from an outsider's point of view, Kratos seemed like a bland character who was always angry and shouting. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but after watching so many game trailers through the years, I found the way Kratos acted to be jarring and annoying. However, this year's reboot of God of War showed me that Kratos can be a complex and multi-dimensional character. God of War's narrative kept me interested from start to finish because of the dynamic between Kratos and his son Atreus. Additionally, God of War has some of the most interesting supporting characters in recent memory. God of War's biggest strength, though, is its gameplay. I've never had more fun with in-game combat in my life. The Leviathan axe is one of my favorite weapons within any game. The ability to throw it back and forth, using a melee, and use it to power runic attacks, creates so many refreshing possibilities. And without spoiling, you get another weapon later in the game that is also amazingly satisfying to use. The presentation is top notch because the graphics, music, and environments make the game feel like a piece of art. Additionally, God of War's camera work makes the game feel more epic and immersive because it uses a one-shot camera, meaning it never cuts. Just like Uncharted 4, God of War does so many things right with no real flaws, but because of the superior gameplay of God of War, is the reason why I put it slightly ahead of Uncharted 4. In my opinion, God of War has the best gameplay of any game on this list, but there are still 2 games I would put ahead of it in my rankings. My second favorite video game is something I felt was ahead of its time and redefined what I expect out of a great video game. Uncharted 2 Among Thieves delivers an exceptional narrative that has strong voice acting, writing, characters, emotion, and pacing. Additionally, Uncharted 2 was the first game that I played where I felt it seamlessly implemented a great story with fun gameplay, beautiful environments, and mind-blowing graphics. And man, Uncharted 2's graphics back in 2009 were like nothing I had ever seen before. I remember stopping in the middle of gameplay just to marvel at the visual fidelity. More recent games such as Uncharted 4 and God of War do certain things better than Uncharted 2. However, I believe that this game set the benchmark for God of War, Uncharted 4, and all modern linear single-player games to follow. There is one game left that stands above the rest. It's the third Naughty Dog game on this list, Some of you may already know what I'm talking about.
What if it's true?
Do I need to remind you what is out there?
Once upon a time, I had somebody that I cared about. And in this world, that sort of shit's good for one thing. Getting you killed.
My favorite game of all time is indeed The Last of Us. First of all, the variety of melee weapons, guns, crafting, and fighting mechanics keep combat fresh throughout The Last of Us. The limited amount of resources and bullets makes scavenging important, as the resources in turn can help you within the grounded and intense combat of The Last of Us. The clickers, bloaters, runners, and stalkers are all terrifying and require the use of different strategies within combat. In 2013, the graphics of The Last of Us pushed visual fidelity to a new standard. The Last of Us world has an atmosphere where the dire circumstances felt palpable. The voice acting and writing are something to behold. The instrumental music is excellent and intensifies this already dark game. Just like games 4 through 2 on the countdown, The Last of Us has no glaring weaknesses, as it checks every box for what I would want in a game. Additionally, what separates The Last of Us from other games is its narrative. Without a doubt, it's my favorite in any game. Another thing that separates The Last of Us from other games is how emotionally invested I became in the overall experience. I have never cared more about a game's lore. I have never cared more about circumstances surrounding characters. I have never cared for two protagonists as much as Joel and Ellie. For you see, this is a tragic and brutal story that turns into a moving experience.